To my fellow Cyberpunk 2077 fans, this is my review. Watch it. It's got everything you could possibly want from a show set in that universe, from the story to the action to the themes juggled to the portrayal of Night City and its various characters to the great soundtrack to the plethora of references and callbacks from the game, visuals from the game, sound effects from the game, songs from the game, vehicles and tech from the game, and even characters from the game. So for all you cyber nerds out there, watch it. For everyone else, let's roll some persuasion first. Cyberpunk Edgerunners is, how do I say this? A blood-pounding, blood-squirting bloodbath of frenzied animation that'll get your blood pulsing from balls to brains. And it's kind of bloody brilliant. There's no politics, no second season being milked. It's not a cheap knockoff just wearing the clothing of its predecessor without the substance. It tells the story of a kid whose life gets pulled from under him and who gets tangled up with this mysterious girl with a mysterious past, which leads him down a path that, you know what, I'm not good at the standard synopsises, so let's go with young blood meets tits and they bang, 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 bang. That about covers it. Also, there's some philosophical stuff about how the world cannot destroy you, it can only goad you into destroying yourself. Nothing fancy. To this end, the true antagonist of Cyberpunk Hedge Trimmers is not some gonk or another, it's Night City itself, the setting of this carnival of carnage. Much like in Cyberpunk 2077, it's the city that ruins people's lives and sets them on a path of self-destruction. And just like in the game, it's tempting to pin the blame entirely on Night City, when in reality, there's always that point where its victims could walk away from it all, but choose to bet it all on red and end up covered in their own red. It does a good job of making you feel sympathy for the protagonist. Within minutes, this kid gets molested by the universe so hard that just witnessing it will make you go, yeah, I'll take my shitty life over his, thank you very much. Speaking of the first few minutes, a lot of shows take their sweet time to get going and get you invested in the plot, to which Edgerunners says, hope you fasten your seatbelt cause we're gone. This is who, what, where, this is why Gamora is done. Bam. Like a virgin in a fleshlight. It's gone. David, presumably named after Michelangelo's David and the biblical figure it represents, and who thus appropriately symbolizes the defense of civil liberties as well as the idea of the pipsqueak taking down the Goliath respectively, is the quintessential impoverished teen who was forced to grow up with a strong sense of self-sacrifice for the benefit of those around him, and who is doomed to carry this mindset into his later years at his own detriment and, ironically, the detriment of those whom he so keenly tries to protect. Lucy, on the other hand, is the exact opposite. She's ultimately willing to damn the world around her if it means saving poor little David. She's the ultimate waifu, loyal to her man to a fault. Theirs is a tragic romance because of their conflicting goals, and 'tis interesting to see how things play out between the two of them. I gotta say, as a fan of the game that this is inspired by, there's some great interconnective tissue here. The transition between game and animation is seamless. I like that they kept some of the songs from the game, that helps too. I think they even edited a couple of them and blended them together with the show's score.
Cool stuff, cool stuff.
Much like in the game, there's this unmistakable contrast in the show between the colorful, punchy, invasive action beats and these sort of down-tempo moments of deep reflection with no words, no crucial story beats, just a lingering moment of meditation, pain, boredom, or longing that mirror the melancholy of real life. It's just some striking imagery with some music in the background. I love that shit. It's like Studio Ghibli on weed and LSD at the same time. Speaking of contrast, there's a similar one between the abject brutality of this world and the soft-spoken innocence of an unlikely romance blossoming in a very simple but effective way.
To be young again.
Yeah, glad that's over.
But it's not just sunshine and cooties, shit gets very real very fast, and the show doesn't shy away from turning most everyone you meet into a morally gray character or a tragic hero. And speaking of characters, the show takes a cue from Arcane and builds backstories the smart and expedient way, showing you just enough to get you intrigued, like a quick flash of the tits, without necessarily spelling everything out. If stories live and die by their characters, then Cyberpunk Runners has certainly secured a reasonably healthy existence for itself. There are also things the show does better than the game. For instance, the idea of cyberpsychosis, which was touched on rather shallowly in the game, is fully explored here. And it all ties back to the central theme that both the game and the show explore very well, that of mortality and losing oneself, like a night at a Scottish pub. By the way, you know how certain people can't stop gushing about some show or another's intro song, or how they waste their time watching the end credits song every single episode? I never watch the end credits of a show. But I watch the end credits of this show. For the song, of course. The way the show reproduces the exact vibe of the game is uncanny. For a human being living there, Night City is a living nightmare. For us viewers and gamers, on the other hand, it's the ultimate playground. And you're definitely filled with that distinct appetite for destruction as you're welcomed to the jungle of dust and bones and guns and roses, and that's about as many musical references I can fit into one sentence. I will say that the show doesn't do the best job of spelling out its vernacular to you, so if you haven't played the video game or the tabletop one, you may struggle to keep up. Then again, this is a cyberpunk setting, you can't expect people to use the term cab instead of Delamain, cool instead of preem, or illegal 18+ hyper-violent fetishistic or pornographic virtual reality clip instead of XBD. It just breaks the immersion. And doesn't roll off the tongue as well. In terms of themes, it juggles a lot of the same stuff that 2077 does, to the point where it almost seems redundant to it, but it doesn't quite get there. It still has its own story to tell, chiefly focused on things like trauma and the inability to move past it, selflessness and how it can be weaponized against you, and, probably the most relatable one of all, one's inability to forge their own path and being stuck trying to live other people's dreams instead of their own. All the things you thought you'd become, all the things you think you need to be, either for yourself or for others' sakes. That's a poison we tend to keep quite close to our hearts, no? The climax goes from tearjerker to buy my panties, make it stop territory. It just takes all the character building and pathos it mustered up to this point and dives off a cliff with them. And I'm still not sure if in a good way or a bad one. Everything is still well executed and it's a powerful ending, if a bit telegraphed, but there's something excessive about the final moments of violence and drama that kind of reminds me of the last half hour of Man of Steel, which showed a similar lack of restraint and blatant disregard for your eyes and ears. I don't get why it's so exhaustively... Oh. Well, that explains it. But I'm not just talking about the over-the-top action. You see, Cyberpunk the game was just as grave and fatalistic with its ending, but tempered the dreariness with a bit more hope, and it didn't blow its misery load so aggressively over your eyes and ears with the virility of a gorilla on steroids. The tone of the game's ending, dreary as it was better balanced is what I'm trying to say, whereas Cyberpunk the show's ending is just misery, misery, misery. So the final moments left me particularly despondent, and I live in the stuff, so fair warning. Overall, though, I declare myself satisfied with this installment. It more than delivers on what it promises and then keeps delivering until you blow a load and a fuse at the same time. If you're a fan of the game, you definitely don't want to miss this. If you're a fan of animation, you also shouldn't miss this. If you're a fan of good stories, you shouldn't miss this. If you're a degenerate, you shouldn't miss this. There's something for everyone. And yes, it totally made me want to replay the game, so well played, Compact Disc Project Red, well played.